All right, welcome everybody back to another episode, fifth week we've been doing it. The Unalienable Right is back. Shawn, Farash, and Dr. Cordie Williams here with you. We got a good one today. Going to be ending a little bit early, but we got a good one, our last one before the midterms, and we're excited. The real threat to democracy tonight. We saw Joe Biden just come out, make a speech. Another one of his divisive, horrible speeches looked a little bit like this again. No red background, but it looked a little bit like that again. It had the same tone. Had the same feel. They took the Nancy Pelosi hammer attack and blamed it on January 6th and Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the guy who attacked them is an illegal alien from, I think, Canada, who is a homeless, drug-addicted guy who found his way into the house for whatever reasons he got into the house. I'm not sure. You're
In
in
his
California.
underwear.
What happened?
Well, I don't know. I always think it's funny that it's a MAGA extremist. But what we know about MAGA extremists is we wouldn't show up in our underwear with a hammer. We would probably show up clothed with a mossy oak hat on or a Trump hat on, and we'd be locked and loaded. So kind of interesting that they blame the guy that ends up in his underwear with a hammer and zip ties, and you hear a story and it comes out as this story, and then it's retracted, and then they won't release any of the camera footage. I mean, this just has cover up all over it. Very similar to the Where is Hunter laptop that we weren't able to see. And meanwhile, pictures are coming out all over social media with him with, underage girls and prostitutes and crack pipes in his mouth. And yet nobody wants to report on it. So
Yeah, I don't know.
crazy.
I don't know what to make of it, but all I heard was, hammer, and then I'm going, oh boy, they're going to make this a politically motivated thing. And then we find out that there really wasn't any political motivation. And I don't know. To me, it just seems very strange to see the way this story keeps unfolding. But I can't comment on it. I've got no idea what would possess any of that activity to go on. Somebody said when the cat was away, the mouse came out to play. So I don't know what went on in that house. I have no idea what was going on. What I do know.
Well, maybe if you had to lay down next to her every night, you'd probably consider being with a man. I don't know. Maybe that.
I said that on Twitter this week. I put a picture up, and I said, actually, I'm going to see if I could find it. It was pretty funny. First, I put a picture up of the mugshot of the person in the house. You're going to laugh if I could find it. I think I put it on my Instagram too. And it was it got it got a couple of really funny reactions. I'm gonna see if I can find it on Twitter. But I said, Nancy Pelosi, if her husband was gay or was kind of in a relationship with another dude, maybe she's the reason why. And I don't know. This is what I put up. I put this up on Twitter. I'm gonna put this on the screen. I said we have found the mugshot. An image of the person who attacked Paul Pelosi. Here he is. Oh, hold on. It didn't pop up. Hold on. Let me see if I can get this to go. There we go. Here's the image of the guy who attacked Paul Pelosi. Yeah, it's Nancy Pelosi with the mustache and the glasses. So, I don't know. I thought maybe she beat him with the hammer from the House of Representatives, which she's not going to be able to hold soon, because you and I were just looking at Real Clear Politics, and I don't know, man, bloodbath on the way, looks like.
Yeah. It looks like a red wave is coming. And, you just talk to people all over the place, and we've been saying it for a couple of weeks. I just heard, I was listening to a show and then talking to a friend, and literally same thing. I'm listening to this show. They're talking about a friend, and then I'm on the phone, and my friend is telling me about a family friend. And the theme was what? People that were diehard Democrats, 10, 15, 20 years, their entire life. Now they're turning back, and they're voting for people like Zeldin. They're voting for people like DeSantis. And why is it? Because the left has gone so far left. Anybody that was ever a Democrat can't even identify them being associated with the Constitution. They just consider them identifying as communists now. That's the only thing they identify as. And, most Americans they're fed up. And you're seeing that in the polls. You're seeing that in races that, were, as you've mentioned multiple times to me privately, that were light years away. And then the gap closed, and then it was going to be a toss up. And now it's like whoever that Republican candidate is, now they're leading or darn near close leading. and we know the polls are skewed. So I think it's a toss-up even in those areas that it's really close.
Yeah, I mean, look at I look at the Real Clear Politics governor's projection right now, and 31. They're projecting the Republicans to hold 31 seats. That's without flipping New York, and Lee Zeldin has a chance. But that is with flipping Wisconsin, okay? Like the flipping Michigan, they're projecting Gretchen Whitmer to go down. So when you think about the COVID kings and the COVID queens out there, you had Newsom, you had Whitmer, you had Murphy in Jersey, who barely survived last year, and we all know what happened there. And you had Hochul, who's the holdover from the Cuomo administration. But if this happens, I look at New Mexico. I heard some rumors about New Mexico, and it was the Hill and Emerson, not a friend to the right now with Grisham only 2 points ahead of Mark Ronchetti out there in New Mexico. And I can tell you, I mean, if that was the Trafalgar group, now Trafalgar's latest poll had Ronchetti up 1. I think Trafalgar needs to run one more poll over there in that state. But that's within the margin of error. If New Mexico flips, okay, if Nevada flips, if Oregon flips, if New York and Pennsylvania both flip, you're talking about like 34 or so states. Minnesota is also in play from what we understand. We're really close to having enough governorships to pass constitutional amendments. I mean, we're getting really, really close. And it's this inertia in this red wave year. You were just talking about somebody who you know in California who's running a race that's much closer. So what's going on over there on the West Coast? Because I can tell you over here on the East Coast, people are done. And I think there's going to be a lot of Democrat crossover that they're not picking up on in polls. And people are just are fed up with high crime and high inflation. What's going on over there in Cali?
Yeah, no, I mean, Brian Marriott, who I campaigned around, is, they're showing Mike Levin, the incumbent, is only +6. So who knows what the margin of error is there, but, he's only +6. I have feelings about Marriott. Marriott's a nice guy, but he's a little squishy. He's a little too squishy for me, but I'm going to check the box. He's a nice guy. I think that, I don't think he's like, a Mitch McConnell by any means. Right. But if I had a better grassroots guy, I would pick that guy. But Marriott's our choice. We got to stand behind him. I think he's a decent selection. And, Marriott's seat, there are other state assembly seats. My good friend Lori Mills, I think she's got a huge opportunity in her district all over California. But, for California, it's the same thing. Statewide races, I think we're going to get crushed in the U.S. Senate race. For a bunch of reasons. I'm not really going to comment on that race for obvious reasons. And then I think we're going to get crushed for governor, because I think I think races in this state are just so corrupt. The National Republican Party doesn't care about the state. The state Republican Party doesn't care about the state. So that's kind of a bad place to be in going into this thing. But, I think, Shawn, that what we have before us, I think if some of these key races, like if we even got half of the races, 70% of the races you mentioned, especially in, these areas where the governors were either pro-COVID or anti-COVID, and those flip or stay the same, meaning, obviously in Florida, DeSantis is going to walk in. But if we get those governors that are rewarded, they stay in for standing up to COVID, and then we flip places like Michigan with Governor Whitlis or Polis, who's a poll in Colorado, or Zeldin in New York. I think that's huge for morale. And I think from a freedom standpoint, the grassroots component, with all the corruption around elections in 2020, I think some of these key races, it would be a huge morale booster for freedom fighters out there if we could even turn like 50 to 70% of these maybe contested races in those really hot, those hot races that everybody's talking about, where maybe a governor or whoever was standing up and masking their people. I think that'd be huge for us as a movement.
So we had those governors races, which are a big deal. Now at the federal level, obviously the House representatives we feel pretty good about, although I always stress to everybody, take nothing for granted. Take nothing for granted. Don't stay home. Oh, yeah, we got this. It's a red wave. We got this. The we got this mindset is how Donald Trump won in 2016 because the Democrats thought Hillary was going to coast in. They thought, Orange Man so bad that nobody was going to vote for him on the Republican side, and he wound up winning that 2016 election very narrowly. But check this out, right? So the House, we see, it looks pretty good. We only have to flip like 5 or 6 seats to have a net gain and take control of the House. It looks like Republicans are going to take control of the House by more than just a small margin. 30 to 40 seats are being projected. As many as 50 seats could wind up flipping. If that happens, there's going to be I will be turning on MSNBC in the morning if that 50 seats flip, because that will just be unbelievable to watch these people melt down. But there was always concerns now about the Senate, right? What are we going to do in the Senate? Are we going to lose the Senate? In 2018, Democrats took the House, but the Republicans added to their seats in the Senate, where Brett Kavanaugh just went through those hearings, and the Senate was playing a big role in confirming him, and they won a few more of those statewide races. Right now, Real Clear Politics is projecting not 51, a slim majority in the Senate, which I would call not a Romney-proof majority, not 52, which is barely there. But 54 seats could go in the Senate, and I don't think we're done now. They're talking about New Hampshire flipping. That would be the 54th seat. Okay, so the potential flips in this election would be Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and now New Hampshire. That would give us 54. But it is worth noting that in Washington State, the race between Murray and Tiffany Smiley, Patty Murray, the incumbent, and Tiffany Smiley, right now is a 2-point race. With inertia, with momentum in a red wave year right now, you could see a senator from Washington State be elected that's a Republican. Oregon is a foregone conclusion. We were just talking about before we jumped on and started streaming Chicago, that Joe O'Dea potentially has a chance. Joe O'Dea came out of nowhere. Now we're hearing that's a 2-point race according to Trafalgar, which is well inside the margin of error. You could have as many as 56 Senate seats, okay, under Republican control, really 55 if you throw Romney out of the way. Come January, I mean, the Biden administration at that point gets stopped in its tracks. But from a morale standpoint, because you've been on the streets with your group, I've been on the streets with my group, where do you see that going? How do you see that charging the base going into 24?
No, I mean, I think we need it. So many people, there's so many theories out there right now. I was talking to somebody this morning and they're like, oh, in California, the election is so different. No, if you overwhelm the vote, you can overwhelm the cheating.
Right.
And if I think mail-in ballots in any state, anybody that's telling you to mail in your ballot and not show up in person, I think they're a moron. Yeah. You need to show up in person. You need to surrender your ballot. You need to vote in person. And, I humbly say that. I've got some friends saying that, and I just don't get it. Arizona State Senator Sonny Borelli, like I talked about 2 weeks ago, he just listed just like the 5 or 6 things that we need to do to correct our elections and protect them. But I think if we get 56 in the Senate, if we sweep 50 to 60% of these gubernatorial races, especially in areas where somebody was just, a Marxist or a communist about COVID and what they did to businesses, what they did to their own people, masking them. If we flip any of those, I think we're just going to see that the Constitution is alive and well in this country. And I think so many people that were let down in 2020 that follow MAGA and follow Donald Trump, I think we need that. I really do. I think that all the hard work that people like you have been doing, Shawn, and my group and people across the country, I think we all need that confidence boost to know that good will win over evil. And that's what we all need to pray for, meditate on, and hope for.
And then after a historic midterm, given everybody watching and listening goes out and votes, because it's not done until we do it. You're never going to win. I like football, hockey. You could be favored to win a game with a huge spread, but until you put those points on the board, you haven't won the game. So we need to follow through and win the game. But you look at this after the midterms, if we have those historic gains in the House and those huge gains in the Senate, and wind up with massive majorities in both houses of Congress. And you're going to see Biden go through impeachment. You're going to see a lot go down. The way they treated Trump, I think. You may see Anthony Fauci have to testify in front of a Senate committee because it's more than just 52 senators. There are a bunch of senators who weren't supposed to get in there who are now going to embrace and go full MAGA and really campaign hard and do their jobs the way they're supposed to do to represent the people that put them into office. And then you're going to see something happen, I believe you're going to see right after the midterms. Donald Trump's going to announce that he's running for president again. And that's going to be one of the biggest shots in the arm for the Patriot movement here in the United States. Are you excited about when that announcement drops?
Yeah, I am, and I'm really excited. I think you're right. I think you're going to see a renewed energy to what we're doing. I think it's also important, however the chips fall and land, and I do hope it's an overwhelming red wave, because I think, if it's subpar, I think that's going to be exciting. I think Trump will still announce. Yeah. But we got to be able to move the needle, prevent some of the communism from getting through there. So we just, we got to cross our fingers. We got to turn out. We got to vote. But then after those midterms, after we get that successful red wave, I think then it's getting back to work after Trump announces, and it's saying, what can we do? Because I think what you're going to see as soon as he announces, I think Soros is going to be back at it with Antifa, BLM. The fake news is going to start attacking. They're going to start their new mission to rig 2024. And I think it's going to be important that us as grassroots, that we find a solution for mobilizing people, getting people at polling locations, figuring out a plan for 2024, and that the Republican Party gets behind that. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and whether people do what Republicans have done in the past, is we win and then everybody sits on their ass. It's going to be really interesting.
That's true. And I think Soros will be ready to rock and roll, like you said, to deploy the shock troops. And that's obviously Antifa and BLM's role, and I think it's time for everybody, and it's really a breath of fresh air to when you see what's happening over on Twitter with Elon Musk, and there's still a lot that needs to go on there. There's a radical who was in charge of their safety and security team, who Elon seems very hesitant to get rid of. But it's important to make sure that we're joining platforms like Rumble that we're on now, Getter that we're on right now. And I think it's important for us to just continue to move our bases into places that are friendly, so we can organize better, and then take the fight into enemy ground, like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram. But specifically to not be intimidated in the face of these things that we've seen, and to not let anybody off the hook, specifically because of what we saw in the summer of 2020. Biden wanted to talk about political violence tonight, and threats to democracy, and election denying. There has not been one election since the year of 2000 when a Republican has won that they have not objected to the results of the election. And yet our candidate for governor, Lee Zeldin, is being called an insurrectionist because he constitutionally objected to the election results in the states of Pennsylvania and Arizona on January 6th. He didn't do it to force a mob into the Capitol. He did it because it was within his constitutional authority to do so. We don't let them off the hook. And that's the biggest thing. And while I want to pivot to this pandemic amnesty story, have you heard about this one from The Atlantic yet?
I saw the title somewhere, Gateway Pundit or somewhere I was reading, but no. Fill me in. Besides the title, I know nothing about it.
So there's a writer with The Atlantic, obviously a liberal rag, Emily Oster, who wrote this article here, this piece, says, let's declare a pandemic amnesty. And the next.
Oh yeah, I did hear about it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
She says we need to forgive one another for what we did and said when we were in the dark about COVID. And my biggest response to just that little portion after the headline is the only reason why we were in the dark about COVID is because people like Emily Oster are the ones who turned out the lights. You were speaking the truth before I even knew you about COVID and masking, because I've seen your work, and we've talked about it, how we felt about those things. You were speaking the truth about the vaccine when you weren't allowed to do that. We were all speaking the truth about this wasn't about public safety. This was about controlling the public. And yet she wants to take this innocent road. Oh, I'm sorry about what I said. Please don't hold it against me. When at the same point in time, they were the ones turning out the lights. They were the ones censoring the truth. They were the ones isolating people from the truth. The 4 steps of gaslighting. Gaslighting is lying, lying often, lying confidently, and isolating people from the truth. And now they want a free pass on it. And the left is getting behind this idea. Amnesty, let's all come together after the pandemic. What do you have to say about that?
No, I mean, it's insane. And it's like, hey, let's sing Kumbaya in the wake of people saying bye to their grandparents and people they loved and cared about through plexiglass, people's rights being constantly violated for 2 years, kicked off of planes, just the level of societal disrespect that the fear mongering and the anti-science and Scarf Lady and the rodent like Fauci created. I mean, there are people that are psychologically scarred, and they will be for years. There are kids that are probably going to have depression issues and anxiety issues that we don't even know about right now because they're not adult yet, but they wore a mask and saw their friends in masks. And for 3 years of their life, that's all they knew. So imagine a 2 or 3 year old that the parent was dumb enough to mask them, and they wear a mask for 2 or 3 years, and maybe they expect that that's normal. And now they live in fear now because they don't have a facial condom on, because that's what they were taught. So, yeah, no, I think it's insane to just say after all these people died, like my good friend Brad, that held the flag, a Vietnam veteran in his late 70s, that held the flag for me. I think it was in Colorado at the Reawaken America tour. It might have been San Antonio, one or the other. He catches COVID. He goes to the hospital because they're elderly folks, and he was just concerned. And excuse me, I think Brad was in his mid 80s. And so his wife had always let Brad take care of everything, his wife, Mary. So they go to the hospital, whatever, typical thing. Oh, you need remdesivir. Then we got the ventilator. Like literally this guy's dead in 5 days.
That's crazy.
He's dead in 5 days. Yeah, right? And so these people just want us to forget about that. And sorry, we messed up. We wanted to hide the science. We wanted, to your point, turn out the lights, and we wanted to censor this whole thing so that Sleepy Joe could get into office and we could have mail-in balloting. But then so we could really turn this republic of ours into Venezuela, and they want all of us to forget about that.
Well, you know what I love about what you just said, and it's so funny because I put a thread up on Twitter about this, and we covered this on the LFA show earlier. But I said, no to pandemic amnesty. I think you saw the video I posted on Instagram today. I said no to pandemic amnesty. Absolutely not to pandemic amnesty. Right? We're not. And you went down the list, and you didn't go down the list the same order as my list was, but you hit almost everything on there. We had people who were getting thrown in jail for running their business because they were told they weren't essential. We had people thrown in jail for going to church. We had children that had to wear masks. They have children now that are about to have to get these vaccines that we know it, they're not effective, okay? And now we're not just finding out that they're not effective. Oh, oops, I drank a glass of water and it didn't really help me. It's not innocuous. This thing is not innocent. We're finding out now that there is why are soccer players all of a sudden dropping dead or collapsing on the pitch? What's going on? Why is there now an mRNA vaccine being released by Moderna to fix the damage from another mRNA vaccine that was released by Moderna? And you're going to get lines of people who are going to take this thing because they were told to by somebody on the mainstream media who's not a doctor, who's taking the advice of Anthony Fauci, who shouldn't be a doctor, who hasn't treated a patient in 30 years. We went, and this list that I have, this thread that I put down, it was, no amnesty for people who shut down schools, people who shut down businesses, people who, decided these very bizarre rules that the virus could be at 6 feet, but not at 3 feet, that you had to be, 6 feet apart from one another, that a piece of cloth that might have been used as somebody's underwear can stop a pandemic that we've never seen before, right? Like all of these things that we heard about this virus that were going to be the answer that weren't the answer. And now, after people got censored, deplatformed, fired, called all sorts of nasty names, if you said anything about the schools, this is in the article here, if you said anything about the schools, you were labeled a domestic terrorist, and they want to just get a pass on this. And I'm like, no, No, you don't get a pass. And this is from the article. She says, in April of 2020, with nothing else to do, my family took an enormous number of hikes. Because it was quarantine, nothing else to do. We all wore cloth masks that I had made myself. So here she is believing that this mask that she made herself was going to stop this epic mass extinction level virus that everyone wanted you to hear about.
She's a viral expert.
Yeah, there you go. We had a family hand signal, which the person in the front on their hike would use if someone was approaching on the trail and we needed to put our masks on. You hear this? Once another child got too close, my then 4-year-old son on a bridge yelled at her, social distancing. So you had kids now yelling at kids. These precautions were totally misguided. In April of 2020, no one got the coronavirus from passing someone else hiking. Outdoor transmission was vanishingly rare. Our cloth masks made out of old bandanas wouldn't have done anything anyway, but the thing is, we didn't know. But we did know.
It's common sense.
Like, didn't we know? Didn't you know? How did you know and she didn't know? She's a smart writer for The Atlantic. You're Dr. Cordie Williams. I love you to death. She thinks she's smarter than you. How did you know and she didn't know? Tell me. I want to know.
Because I'm not a moron. That's what I would say, because I'm not a moron. And despite, there's a lot of well-educated morons. That's what I always say. There's a lot of people that go through school that are stupid because there's no critical thinking that really goes on anywhere. Like it's still just, I'm dumbfounded by the fact that people could think that distance, like I go to Navy Federal Credit Union. Okay, Navy Federal Credit Union is where all my money is, personal and business and all that. And still, right now, they have the plexiglass up divider. And you can obviously put your hands all around it like I'm putting them around my computer right now. Right. And I'm talking to the lady and, when you talk to someone about this, I feel stupid. I feel dumber talking about it. Like how explaining why plexiglass, she's like, well, we sure did notice that less people got it here, and I never got COVID while I was working. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm sure it was because of the plexiglass. I'm sure that's the reason why you didn't get COVID. But like, this is where we're at, dude. And you've got these. She's coming around and trying to say, give everybody a pass, and it's okay. Be kumbaya. Go put on your Lululemon pants, buy your green drink, and do a downward dog, and screw all the Marines that got court-martialed during this time. And the list of, there's so many offenses. You and I named so many of them, but there's still some that we're not mentioning, right? Like even somebody having to walk in to a store to buy something and being accosted. You go to get something to eat, and you have some Karen chewing your ass because you didn't have your facial condom on. Or whatever. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was just like, okay, here we go. It's about to go down again. I would just tell my wife, I'm like, get ready, babe. And you would have to viscerally prepare for it. And then you're kind of like, do I want to be in love this time and lovingly tell somebody they're a moron? Or do I want to go rage against the machine on them? And I was always conflicted about either one, right? God tugging on me. You got the red guy and the white guy on one side, telling you what to do.
Yeah. I remember when the mass Karens were out there and there were some people in like the supermarkets, that would come up. Yeah. And you got to put the mask on, and I would just be like, no, it's on, and it wasn't on, and I was like, no, it's on, and they would look at me like I had 4 heads, and I would just keep going because what are you gonna argue? I just kept shopping.
Exactly.
It's on.
Yeah, you would walk right by them, and I eventually did that too as a tactic. I would just act like the person's not there and just walk by them because they would stare you down.
Yeah.
They would like look it through your soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I go, I'll be leaving in about 5 minutes. I just got a couple of things of eggs and a roast beef I got to pick up. Just give me a second. I'll be gone. And it would get them so twisted. It was hysterical. One more part from this article, and then we'll go to the CDC, because I know you're itching to talk about this, what the CDC did with the childhood vaccine schedule. And this will lead right into that, because they talk about kids here in this article. This Emily Oster, she says some of the choices turned out to be better than others. To take an example close to my own work, she's a college professor. Would you believe it? There is an emerging, if not universal, consensus that schools in the United States are closed for too long. The health risks of in-school spread were relatively low, whereas the costs to students' well-being and educational progress were high. The latest figures on learning loss are alarming, but in spring and summer of 2020, we had only glimmers of information. reasonable people, people who cared about children and teachers, advocated on both sides of the reopening debate. Now we're advocates. Now we're advocating on both sides of the debate. But back in the spring of 2020, back in the summer of 2020, back in the spring and summers of 2021, we were domestic terrorists because we didn't want children to be wearing masks. And they want a pass on this. My question to you, do they think we didn't remember? Do they think we're not conscious of the fact that these people put us on lists? I mean, what do they think's going on?
Yeah. There are people that still have U.S. Marshals that follow them, or multiple pat downs, or processes that they and their family have to go through to fly. I was kicked off of so many planes. We could go on. It's absurd. The fact that she would write this article shows how brainwashed she is. The only credit I can give her is that she's willing to admit that she was wrong, but she's doing it in this passive aggressive way of not taking accountability. No, you're a professor and you're a moron, and you chose the wrong side. You chose the side that was anti-freedom, anti-science, and anti-protecting your kids. And you're probably the same person that got 5 boosters and multiple COVID scam shots. And I pray you don't end up like the NFL football coach that died a couple of days ago, or the different celebrities or people we hear about every day, or the ones that we don't hear about, God forbid, that are passing away of all these different things. And then there's just more chemicals coming out and more boosters. I don't know. I'd heard we weren't even going to need a booster. Originally, the ouchie Fauci was the only shot you would need.
Right.
And now we're on booster number 5.
Yep.
And I wonder how many billions, and I say billions with a B, of dollars Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, and Pfizer, and the many others I'm not mentioning, have made the last 3 years. I mean, it would be fascinating to look at it.
Yeah, and now they're saying that they're going to be selling the vaccine at an even steeper markup, obviously, going forward. So it's a big, I think it's a big economic scam. Obviously, it's like a Ponzi scheme. Get this one booster, you'll never need another one, and the next thing you know, they're hitting you up again, and we're not paying for them, but someone's paying for them. And if the government's paying for them, then we are paying for them. It's like we're paying for Ukraine right now. And so many other things. But when we talk about schools and we talk about children, how about this vaccine schedule? We are going to be putting this on the screen now with regards to the vaccine schedule for the CDC. I'm going to pop it on the screen, and why don't you tell everyone what got you fired up about this?
Well, if you don't follow Stand for Health Freedom, follow them, because from what I could see, they endorsed me, and that's not the only reason I believe in them. I believe in them because they seem really grassroots supporters, like who is pro-science, who's pro-constitution, and I wouldn't say they're necessarily anti-vaccine, but they're anti-people not having a choice. But they do put the facts out there, and you can see at this chart. Sorry, Shawn. 1962, there were 5 doses of vaccines we got. I was born in 1980, 24 doses. We're 2022, there's 79 doses. And Shawn said it before, and I've said it before. Now they're talking about putting COVID in there. And look at the bottom of this graph, guys, and you can go standforhealthfreedom.com. You can literally download this chart. It's really easy to find. Print copies of this, share it on your Instagram. Look at all the facts. This isn't conjecture. Since 1986, pharma has not been liable for vaccine injury or death. The Vaccine Injury Court has awarded over $4.7 billion in injuries that they paid to children and families injured through vaccines. And, it goes on to say at the bottom of this chart about COVID and the different COVID things that they're seeing. There are over 90 vaccines with approximately 1 million adverse events reported to VAERS since 1988, right? So VAERS is a reporting system for vaccine injuries. So they're safe and effective, but there's a, organization or a software reporting system that manages when they're not safe and effective. And there's 4.7 billion that's been awarded. So just stuff to look at, guys. I'm an anti-vaxxer. I always say that. I fly my freak flag. Both my kids weren't vaccinated. If you want to vaccinate, hey, that's the greatest thing about the Constitution. But what I would say, know what you're putting in your kid's body. And so many of these things, they've got mercury, they've got aluminum, they've got dead baby fetal tissue. So if you're a Christian and you claim to be, against abortions, you're putting dead babies into your bloodstream and your kid's bloodstream. Now, again, just to go back to what Shawn and I were saying a second ago, if you think it didn't make sense to be 6 feet away from somebody or wear a facial condom on your face, think about putting dead baby fetal tissue cells into your body and into your bloodstream, or mercury or aluminum that are neurotoxins. If you cancel out everything else I said, and I'm an extremist right-winger freak, like that just is kind of common sense.
Yeah, I don't think doing that. I don't think taking dead baby fetal cells and putting it in our bloodstream is going to stop the spread of COVID-19. That's for sure. A quick shout out to, we are streaming on YouTube right now, and I'm going to blow your mind. We actually have somebody watching from New Zealand right now.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've got someone watching from New Zealand. I have been there once. It was a great time. I was there, I believe, in the it was our summer, so their fall winter of 2007. And I'm I do try to follow them as much as I can. I'm a big fan of the New Zealand All Blacks, the rugby team. So for that guy watching in New Zealand, hello, kia ora, I believe is the word in Maori. And you guys are awesome. Unfortunately, New Zealand has sort of devolved into a little bit of totalitarianism down there. So did Australia, but I do believe we could fight back. Unfortunately, what happened in Brazil, I think their election may have been a little funky. I don't know if we could say anything because YouTube's now cracking down on the folks over there in Brazil, unfortunately. But no, but that vaccine, putting the COVID vaccine on the schedule for children to go to public schools, when we know that the risk of spreading the disease not only is low in public schools, but that if children get this disease, it's not going to, or it's very, very unlikely that they're going to be suffering severe impacts from this disease. And yet all of a sudden we have these people trying to make it so that you, a parent, must jab your kid and give them the COVID vaccine. This can't be about public safety. What do you think the motive is?
It's control. And like I'll go back to what you said a second ago. I think you're right. If you can't see that in 1962, we were such an unhealthy species which God created this fragile, weak body that has no innate systems. And now I don't know how humanity survived without the 79 doses of vaccines that we're getting in 2022. 1962, there were 5 doses. You know why? Because it's a Ponzi scheme. It's complete BS. It's totally a bastardization of the fiber of our republic, this capitalistic market we're supposed to have. And it really shows how corrupt, whether you talk these bureaucracies that we have, the FDA, the American Medical Association, the Center of Death and Control, the CDC.
I like that.
Right? You like that?
Yeah,
or the
like
Food and Death Administration. That's the other one.
I like that. I like
typically.
the Center of Death and Control. I like that a lot.
And so, you look at those, Shawn, and you look at this, pharmaceutical industrial complex, you look at the insurance companies, and then you look at the Gates Foundation, this global movement. And there's just one thing that they all have in common. They're all here to profit, and they wish that they could profit with an elite class and a slave class, and they want it to be Venezuela. And that's really the only thing that can make any sense when you look at the vaccines, you look at the production of the vaccines, how much they've increased. You look at the same people that are supporting the vaccines are then endorsing drag queens reading to our kids, and some of the stuff you're seeing around the country that where it's literally teaching kids sex acts and talking about male and female genitalia and just explicitly graphic things that no child at any age should know, and certainly the school shouldn't be teaching them that.
The-
And all this is connected, and if you can't see that, it's no longer a Republican or Democrat thing, and I'm going to continue to say that because it's not.
Yeah, it's not a Republican or Democrat thing. We have it all the time here. Our candidate for lieutenant governor says it all the time, Allison Esposito, that it's not a red wave or a blue wave or a patriot wave or a MAGA wave. It's a common sense wave at this point. Did you hear now? I just saw the headline fly by that the CDC has changed the word woman to pregnant person in some of their latest guidance, right? So in other words, basically the CDC virtue signaling to the folks who believe that anybody other than a woman can get pregnant, which is a medical impossibility, right? Or am I wrong and intolerant and bigoted in saying that only women get pregnant?
No, only women get pregnant, and there's a word that I love to say, and I feel like I first heard a New Yorker say it, but it starts with an R and it ends in a D. But I'm not going to because I don't want to be uncouth and offend someone. But you have to be a moron if you think that, and I think that's where if people are relying on these things all the time, and obviously you and I are influencers. We do reels, we do posts, we do all that stuff for a bunch of reasons because we want to move, touch, and inspire people to make a change in their life and help the republic so we can have a future for our kids. But if this is what you listen to and you follow CNN and you follow Fox too much and you think that all these corporations aren't connected to this global effort that I talked about a second ago, there's no hope for you. And, you'll be the first one on the cattle cart to Auschwitz.
I think so. I think so. If we don't all stand up, and there were people asking during COVID, when does this all stop? It stops when you say it stops. It's over when you say it's over. Florida, Ron DeSantis, even Brian Kemp. I don't love the guy, but his handling of COVID, he was way ahead of the curve. Anybody else in the country, maybe he was doing that as damage control after he botched the 2020 elections. Very possible, but he still opened that state up before a lot of other states fully opened. Georgia was open and ready to go. But it stopped when the people said it was done. It was over when the people said it was over. Ron DeSantis knew the people in Florida did not want to wear masks anymore, did not want to have their children being used as pieces of a political puzzle. And he decided to remove all of those things and make those things, an impossibility in Florida. And their quality of life increased so drastically that the state we used to have to bite our nails off before we got the results in and know who won, the state that Ron DeSantis won by 0.4 of a percentage point, 30,000 votes, he's going to win by 15 plus, maybe 20 points going into 2022 here in the midterms. That's incredible. Now, speaking to governors, I want to go to your governor, unfortunately, your governor, real quick. And this is probably one of the only times I'm ever going to agree with Gavin Newsom. But your governor, California Governor Gavin Newsom, has admitted that Democrats are, quote, getting crushed on the messaging. This is a new thing that just dropped today, Epic Times. Gavin Newsom, he says it here, quote, it goes to my fundamental grievance with my damn party, Newsom said in an interview with CBS News that aired on Wednesday. Quote, we're getting crushed on the narrative. We're going to have to do better in terms of getting on the offense and stop being on the defense, is what he said. And it's so funny because I feel like this is a conversation that we have had with Republicans for such a long time. And the fact that the Democrat Party now is starting to slip into disarray, that you're seeing, stronger leaders, or at least more well-entrenched leaders of the Democrat Party like Gavin Newsom start to admit this, I think it's a good sign for us. What do you think?
No, 100%. And it really paints the picture of what he's really saying is that we're for the Constitution. They're not.
Right.
And people that are following us are now for common sense. And it's really, I think, a admittance that what they're doing to try to brainwash and gaslight people isn't working. And that's why you're seeing them in attack ads in my district, District 49 of California. Mike Levin, the only thing he has against Marriott, against Brian Marriott, is literally the only thing that he has is abortion. They're just bringing up, and you're really seeing that, across the U.S. We talked about that 2 weeks ago, that's all they got because they don't have any solutions, and they know that. And so I think that's just, a lie detector test for Newsom, admitting that his party's gone too far with this just globalist, socialist, Marxist agenda they have, and it's failing.
It's definitely failing. The Democrats are realizing that they're failing. And honestly, I am beyond thrilled to see a guy. Look, we have a guy out here in New York City in the city council. His name is Bob Holden, and he's leading the coalition Democrats for Zeldin. And he's a bit of a moderate. He's a bit of a moderate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. He's one of the longest sitting Democrat city councils in New York, city councilman in New York City, and he's leading a coalition Democrats for Zeldin, trying to get as many crossovers as possible because he knows that Kathy Hochul's just gone way too far. And the party's gone further than him, and it's kind of like the Tulsi Gabbard situation. But when you have a radical, a guy who, I'm sure if we toured his home, and behind the bookshelf, Scooby-Doo style, there was a shrine to Joseph Stalin in that house somewhere, Gavin Newsom. The fact that he is now coming out and saying we're losing, to me, maybe, just maybe, they are losing. And what this means for us on the right side of things, on the Republican side, on the Patriot side, on the MAGA side, whatever you want to call it, the constitutional side, the liberty side, we cannot give any ground back. And there's a lot of people who get worn out through this process. I'm one of them. I know a lot of people who have been burned and who have been just driven into the ground, screwed over 10 times over. Hey, look, we can go on and on about those stories. I'm sure we could do a whole week of things about those stories, what you and I have witnessed. But we can't let up on this opportunity. When you've got moderates like Bob Holden, that's one thing. When you've got radicals like Gavin Newsom, a presidential favorite for the Democrat Party in 24 and beyond, saying these things, we've got them on the ropes, and we've got to keep pushing. And I know that you got a jet. It's we're almost to the end here. So why don't you tell everybody where they can follow you and get amped up for next Wednesday?
Well, I love that. And the only thing I was going to say before I tell them where they can follow me, I wonder if behind that Scooby-Doo kind of library inside Gavin Newsom's house, if there's another man in his underwear with a hammer. yeah. I just wonder. It might be. He said Paul Pelosi's his friend, so I don't know, right? And Biden said that too, so I don't know if that's just something they do.
My bet is if there's a man with their hammer in their underwear in Gavin Newsom's house, it's 100% Eric Swalwell.
I love it. No, you guys can find me at CordieWilliams.com. CORDIE Williams.com, and or you can go to 1776foreverfree.com, and Dr. Cordie W is my handle on most platforms. And really enjoyed the night. Thanks for covering for me, Shawn, last week. And I know I wasn't here, and you ran it, and you always crush it, and I appreciate you so much, brother.
Yeah, we love you too. We thank you again for joining us, and we'll be back next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of The Unalienable Right. Until then, folks, just stay healthy, stay safe. Get your friends out to vote. This race is not over. The midterms are not over until we put up the points and run up the score, which I think we're going to do. And we will be back next week for another episode of The Unalienable Right, as I continue to... I kind of Bidened and Fettermaned my words there. Sorry. But we'll be back next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please share everything everywhere. Hit the like button where you're watching. Hit the Rumble button if you're on Rumble. We got a nice audience there today. Get her as well at the repost. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you, guys. Good night.
God bless you guys.